air. Praise Yahweh! Praise Yahweh! Now I'm going to do it with this one. Praise Yeshua!
Try again.
Praise Yeshua! This is the day of trumpets, day Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, yes, that's the right one. Practice this all this time and then I can't even get it right. This is Yom Teruah, day Yom Teruah, shouting, not trumpets, shouting is the voice. Because there's a reason why, and we're going to go through that. We're going to find out a whole lot about this day. In the past, I've sat through a lot of sermons where they've kind of, I don't know what we should talk about today. I don't know what this is all about. There's nothing specific. Well, they didn't go through their scriptures and look, because there are a lot of specific instances. And that's what we're going to go through. You're going to get tired of looking at scriptures today and the amount that I've got in this thing. And hopefully I can get this all in the next 2 hours. Well, we haven't got anywhere else to go. That's one of the advantages. Okay, we can start this by turning over to Leviticus chapter 23, starting in verse 23. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, shall be a solemn rest to you, a memorial of blowing of trumpets. Well, that memorial is the word zikron, to remember, to keep something before you, to keep in remembrance of something. Blowing of trumpets. Well, actually, it's a shouting of the trumpets, because that's an ear-piercing sound that you hear. It talks about, and there are actually two trumpets listed. This is a shofar, a ram's horn. Okay? And for those out there, this is not a ram's horn. This is from an antelope. It just makes a prettier sound than this other one does. And then there's what's called a hatzeret, which is the silver trumpets. They were actually used more than the shofar. And this is what we're going to get into, and I'm getting ahead of myself naturally. Let me get over here to my... the word here that's trumpets is the word teruah, which is actually talking about the sound that it makes. Teruah, definition. It's defined as an alarm, a signal, a sound of tempest, a shout or blast of war or alarm or joy. It is used, well, it's like here, when there's a tornado warning in the local area, what do you hear? You hear an alarm, a siren. It's shaped like a trumpet, and it makes a sound similar to a trumpet. I just can't blow it like that. It just, but it does that. It goes on to talk about it's an alarm of war cry, battle cry, blast, telling you when to march, shout of joy with religious impulse, like we shouted at the beginning of this, a shout of joy in general when everybody is happy, woo, woo, But that's basically, and it comes from H7321, Hebrew 7321, in the Brown Driver's Briggs, the word ruah. The word ruah is to shout, raise a shout, cry out, give a blast. In its hip hill form, now you got to have biblical Hebrew to understand what hifil is, means to shout. Now we've changed it from just a shout, to shout, a war cry or alarm of battle, to sound a signal for war or march, to shout in triumph over enemies, to shout in applause, to shout with religious impulse, to cry out in distress. Then it's in what is called polal form of the same word, to utter a shout. And then it's got hit polel, to shout in triumph and to shout for joy. And then it's in nephal, destroyed. Because what happened to Jericho with the shout? It was destroyed. See, these are the things of the verb here, to shout. You have to know whether it's like this, nephal, or hitpile, or hephil, or just the regular verb. Because each one of those changes exactly how it's used in a sentence and how it's translated. When people talk about renewed covenant, sorry, the form of the verb renew is not there. It's not found, not in the first 5 books. The only term that's used is the present new. It's a new covenant. Every time that they did a covenant, it was new, because they weren't doing the same old one, because they were adding to it or changing it. You can't, I mean, you look at a contract today, they don't change a contract. I mean, they don't take a contract and just add a new verse to it. They change it to take care of what's what is now going to be the new standard for that contract. And that's the same way it is in the scriptures. In fact, you know, that's why it's called the New Testament. When you get over into the New Testament, it's the new covenant. It's actually the word covenant there. So what a testament means is a covenant. So when it talks about the New Testament and new covenant, sometimes I get ahead of myself because I'm thinking so many things going on at one time. Turn with me over to Numbers chapter 10, verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, make 2 trumpets of silver. This one here is a replica, but it's too long. It's got an extra joint in it. It's actually only about a foot and a half, 18 inches. Well, what is a foot and a half? 18 inches. Anyway, you make 2 trumpets of silver. You shall make them of beaten work. You shall use them for the calling of the congregation. So it's to call people together. Well, you think about it. When there was, an estimated about, now I'm trying to remember the numbers for how many came out of Egypt with the 600,000 men, wasn't it? Okay. That's a lot of people. And when you look at the size of the camp and look at how it's spread out over the desert, and you see, how do you get people to move? They didn't have a PA system. Well, they silver trumpet, which is a hatzeret, was what they used. Why do you think the cavalry had that? Or even during World War I, they used trumpets to tell them when to come up out of the trenches and go forward, when to retreat. So you had all these sounds that were made, and then in every military camp there was morning reveille, and there was another one blowing at the evening, telling you when time to go to bed, and all of this. So it's easier to do that, especially if you've got people that are scattered off across a battlefield. How do you call them back together? How do you tell them to go forward? How do you tell them to go back? And so this is what this was. And when you're talking about the children of Israel in the wilderness, when to get up, when to march forward, when not, and how to keep them together. It says, make 2 trumpets of silver. You shall make them of beaten work. You shall use them for the calling of the congregation and for the journeying of the camps. Verse 3, when you blow them, all the congregation shall gather themselves to you at the door of the tent of meeting. Now this is before the tabernacle. You realize that? This tent of meeting was a tent that Moses went out to meet Yahweh before they put together all of the tabernacle attributes. And verse 4, if they blow just one, Then the princes, the heads of the household of the thousands of Israel shall gather themselves to you. When you blow a alarm, and that alarm is the same word, teruah, shout. The camps that lie on the east side shall go forward. When you blow an alarm or shout the second time, the camps that lie on the south side shall go forward. They shall blow an alarm or shout for their journeyings. Because when you read the description of the camp of Israel, each of the 12 tribes had their place around with the tabernacle in the middle. And so certain ones were on the north side, some were on the south side, some were on the west side. Not very many on the east side. There's a reason for that. Because anytime there was a judgment to be made, like Korah, they were brought to the east side. Okay? Now, to give you an idea, behind me is east. You're facing east. Okay? So, the Ark of the Covenant would have been back there next to the wall. That was where Yahweh was sitting in the tabernacle. And when they brought Korah and all of his people to the doorway, which would be behind me, so that Yahweh is sitting there looking at what's being done, and Yahweh made a judgment. And what did Yahweh do? The ground opened up and swallowed them. So from that point on, when anybody was charged with a capital crime, they were brought before the door of the tabernacle, and then later on the temple, for the final judgment of Yahweh. So that's why a lot of them believe, I say a lot, there are a number of people that believe that the crucifixion took place on the Mount of Olives across, directly east of the door of the tabernacle. Because then they were talking about, it talks about when he died, the veil was ripped. Well, how can you, if you go to what they call Golgotha today, it's a couple of 100 yards to the north of even what's the Temple Mount, and you would not be able to see the renting of the veil. But if you were over on the Mount of Olives looking back down, then, and that gets into a whole other story. Yes.
No, I was just going to share that the camp's arrangement around the tabernacle is similar to this. It's the same arrangement in the gates of New Jerusalem in Revelation.
Yeah, the New Jerusalem in Revelation.
Yeah,
and where
it's the same arrangement.
They will be arranged. Which tribe? Let's see. Numbers 10:7. But when the assembly is to be gathered together, you shall blow, but you shall not sound an alarm or teruah. It's just a sound of the trumpet. Verse 8. The sons of Aaron, the priests, shall blow the trumpet. This shall be to you for statute forever throughout your generations. They were the only ones that actually had the authority to blow this signal. Because if you had everybody else blowing a signal, people would get confused. Verse 9, when you go to war in your land against the adversary who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the shout with the trumpets. Then you will be remembered before Yahweh your Elohim, and you will be saved from your enemies. Also in the day of your gladness, this is a day of gladness too, and in your set feast, this is a feast day, and in the beginning of your months, this is the first day of the 7th month. You shall blow or shout the trumpets over your burnt offerings, over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, and you shall, they shall be to you for memorial before your Elohim. I am Yahweh, your Elohim, the possessive. The word is Elohim. That's what I was. Sometimes I get tongue-tied on all of this. One of the other things I just saw on here I need to take a look at. Numbers 10. Let's see. It's one thing about doing it with this, Numbers 10. I wanted to check something here. In Numbers 10:9, let me see up here. It says, yeah, it's talking about here when you go against a war, basically it's to use the silver Hatzeret trumpet. I just want to make sure it wasn't the shofar, because there are different uses for the shofar. Okay. And it's also when you do over your offerings, they were to blow that Hatzeret to announce the offerings that were being made, the sacrifices that were being made. Numbers 29:1. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no regular work. It is a day of blowing or shouting of the trumpets to you. It's everything is to be done with this shout, because it's gladness in this case, or it could be an alarm. And we will get to that too. Numbers 31, verse 6. Moses sent them 1,000 of every tribe to war, them and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, to war with the vessels of the sanctuary and the trumpets, the Hatzeret, for the shouting in his hand, so that he could signal them to go forward or to retreat. So now we're going to go to examples of the use of the trumpet. We can start off with Jericho. That's probably the most effective one, found in Joshua 6:5. Joshua 6:5, he gives the instructions of what they were to do. It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, Teruah. And the city walls shall fall down flat, and the people shall go up, and every man straight in front of him. Verse 20 of chapter 6, it goes down, and now we see what happens. So the people shouted, and the priest blew the trumpets, and when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, a Teruah. And the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight in front of him, and they took the city. I've been to Jericho. You can see what all this crumbled wall area. So, I mean, you think about it. And also it makes me wonder, is it the fact that with their shout that they actually generated, like when you, woman hits, I think it's a high C that will crack lead glass, or, you know, or makes it vibrate. Okay, now we have other examples. 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 5. And this is talking about when the ark of Yahweh's covenant came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth rang again. So sometimes you wonder if that shout is having a resonance or resonating effect. In verse 6, that when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, what does in the camp of the Hebrews mean? They understood that Yahweh's ark had come into the camp. They understood what happened, because they knew the people were saying, well, we're now going to be the champions. The problem was they weren't the champions, because that wasn't what Yahweh wanted. 2 Samuel 6:14. This is when David was going to move the ark to the to the temple. 2 Samuel 6:14. David danced before Yahweh with all his might. Well, might and abandon. And David was clothed in a linen ephod. Well, isn't that supposed to be what the high priest or the Levitical priest is supposed to be wearing. So David and all the house of Israel brought up Yahweh's ark with shouting and with the sound or the voice of the trumpet. Let me check something on that one too. 2 Samuel 6:15. I have a program here that tells me, in this case, the trumpet that they were sounding was the shofar as they did this. First Chronicles 15:28. Again, it talks about, thus all of Israel, in 1 Chronicles 15:28, thus all of Israel brought the ark of the Yahweh's covenant up with shouting, with the sound or the voice of the cornet, with trumpets, and with cymbals, sounding aloud with string instruments and harps. Okay. 15. Oh, come on. And a lot of these I was able to get taken care of. When it said trumpets, and with trumpets, basically it's just grouping them all together in that particular word, because it means the word is clarion. So anyway, just want to make sure. And 2 Chronicles 13:12. 2 Chronicles 13:12. Behold, Elohim is with us at our head, and his priest with the trumpets, the Hatzeret of alarm, are shouting to sound an alarm against you. Children of Israel, don't fight against Yahweh. I mean, we all need to think about that in a lot of things. You know, when we think that we know right, or we know better, we're just not willing to wait. It's like Abraham wasn't willing to wait. So he wound up with two sons, but mainly what I'm thinking of is Jacob. Jacob wound up with 12 sons by different women, and all the problems that it brought on later on, because he wasn't willing to wait. Also, he had to rush things. He didn't allow Yahweh to take care of it. He'd already gotten Esau's birthright. It was his, because Esau had given it. But no, he had to do through subterfuge, go to his father and pretend to be Esau and get the blessing. And then when Esau showed up, he had to flee. He went, and then when he made an agreement to work for a wife, only thing was, the next morning after the wedding night, that wasn't the one he'd agreed to. Whereas if you think about it, if he'd have waited and let things run out, Esau would have been the first one that went to the family and would have married the first boy.
Leah.
Yeah, Leah. And so I mean, you've got all these things. And when he talks about here, it says, don't fight against Yahweh. Give Yahweh the chance to do it. The Elohim of your fathers, for you will not prosper if you fight against him. You never know when you try to make decisions whether or not you're actually interfering with Yahweh in some cases, if it's not your place to do it. 2 Chronicles 15:12. They entered into the covenant to seek Yahweh, the Elohim of their fathers, with all their heart and with all their soul. And whoever would not seek Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, should be put to death, whether small or great, whether man or woman. In verse 14, they swore to Yahweh with a loud voice, with shouting, with trumpets, and with cornets. So, I mean, they were trying to get his attention, to let him know that this is what they were doing. Turn with me to Ezra 3:10. Ezra chapter 3, verse 10. When the builders laid the foundation of Yahweh's temple, this is after they returned from captivity, they set the priests in their clothing with trumpets, with the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise Yahweh according to the directions of David, king of Israel. They sang to one another in praising and giving thanks to Yahweh. See, that's another part of this shouting. I mean, you raise your voice when you sing. You give it with a sound. For he is good, for his loving kindness endures forever toward Israel. All the people shouted with a great shout of Teruah when they praised Yahweh, because the foundation of Yahweh's house had been laid. But many of the priests and Levites and heads and fathers, but many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first house, meaning they had seen the first temple, when the foundation of this temple was laid before their eyes, wept with a loud voice. Many also shouted aloud for joy, because another part of joy is raising your voice and saying, "Yippee, whoopee, whoop, 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 whoopee." Okay? So that the people could not discern the noise of the shout of joy from the noise of the weeping of the people, the moaning. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the noise was heard far away. Job chapter 33, verse 26. There's another little point that's given to this shouting. He praised Elohim, Job 33, 26, and he is favorable to him, so that he sees his face with joy, with shouting. He restores to man his righteousness. You know, the joy, so happy. Job 39, 25. This just breaks into the thought. It says, Job 39, 25, as often as the trumpet sounds, he snorts. Aha! He smells the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains, and the shouting. All the noise of battle. I think this was talking about a war horse. Psalms 27, 6. Here in the Psalms it says, 24, 6, now my head will be lifted up above my enemies around me. I will offer sacrifices of joy, or shouting, in his tent. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises to Yahweh. Hear, Yahweh, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also on me and answer me. So a lot of times it's part of the petitioning process that you're making to Yahweh. You're trying to make a point, get his attention. Be before his face. Psalms 47, 5. Psalms 47, 5. It says here, Elohim has gone up with a shout. Yahweh with the sound of a trumpet. Sing praises to Elohim. Sing praises. Sing praises to our King. Sing praises. For Elohim is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with understanding, with purpose. What is it that you're trying to do? You're trying to attract attention from Yahweh. A lot of times you're trying to make sure that he's not paying much attention to what we're doing. But there are times that you want him to pay attention and that's the problem. Sometimes is the fact that that's the only time you really want to get his attention, is when you've done something that you shouldn't have done, or you're reaping the, I guess say not benefits, but the punishment for what you have done. Psalms 89:15. Blessed is the people that know the joyful sound, the shouting. They shall walk, O Yahweh, in the light of your countenance, meaning your face. Psalms 150, verse 5. Praise him with loud cymbals. Praise him with high, resounding or shouting cymbals. I mean, talking about making noise. Attention. Let everything that has breath praise Yah. Praise Yah. Okay. Jeremiah 4:19. My anguish, Jeremiah 4:19, my anguish, I am pained at my very heart. My heart trembles within me. I can't hold my peace, because you have heard, O my soul, the sound of the trumpet, the alarm, the shout of war. And what are we hearing today? We're hearing the alarms, the shout of war. Most people are not paying much attention to what's going on in Ukraine. But you better be, because it just expanded. The Ukrainians just dropped 10 cruise missiles into a shipyard in the Russian Crimea. Part of the damage was to a landing ship, and the other was to a certain Kilo class submarine that was in the dry dock being repaired. Well, those things don't come cheap. They're $500 million in cost. And they just got damaged again, if not totally destroyed. So, the Russians are now going to be looking for a way to get even. So, it expands. There's quite a few that believe that if our current administration continues on the pathway with Ukraine, that it's going to drag us into a nuclear war with Russia. Because when Russia gets down to a certain point, they're not going to lose. And they've got a particular type of cruise missile, I think, that can be here in like less than 45 minutes, any place here in the United States. It's a super cruise missile, and we don't have anything to defend against it. It's just too fast. So think about what it would be like if suddenly New York is no longer there, or Washington, D.C. is no longer there. Now, we might be better off there. But they no longer there. Houston's no longer there. Dallas is no longer there. Well, I'm talking about y'all, not me. I'm in Paris. I'm 120 miles away. I got a little better chance of surviving. But anyway, it's just the way that's going on. And it's like here, verse 20 of Jeremiah 4, destruction on destruction is decreed, for the whole land is laid waste. Suddenly my tents are destroyed and my curtains gone in a moment. How long will I see the standard and hear the sound of the shofar, the trumpet? Jeremiah 20, verse 16. Let that man be as the cities which Yahweh overthrew and didn't repent. Let him hear a cry in the morning and a shouting at noontime. The commentary says, and let him hear the cry in the morning and the shouting at noontime. As soon as he is up in the morning, the first thing that salutes his ears, let it be the noise of an enemy invading the city he dwells in. And by noon, let him hear the shouting of him having broke in and gotten the victory, seizing the plunder. I have an app on my, or I should say, I'm signed up for a subscription called Quora, Quora. And it gives all these little tidbits and history and all this. And lately what they've been doing is talking about the events that happened to civilians that lived in Germany when World War II broke out. And they were not supportive of the government. And all what they went through, it was like this girl and her mother. She was about, I think, 10 at the time. And the deprivations that they went through. Mama was having to go out on the street and beg because they didn't have any money. Daddy was evidently nowhere to be found. Or he was in the military. And So Mom was having to do whatever she could. We're not talking about prostitution. We're talking about just whatever work she could get, whatever she could scrounge. She got good at going out into the wood, the forest, and gathering chamomile. If you know what that is, it's flower, and making a tea. And the woman said, to this day, I hate chamomile. The smell even of it, it just reminds me of what we went through. And they were living in the attic of a house, sleeping on a mattress with not enough cover to keep them warm. And dealing with all the things, deprivations as you run through it in a war. Something that, while we've gone through it as part, or I should say this nation has gone through it as part of I'll think of the right word in a minute, the 1929, the Depression and what followed that. Nothing to the extent that this went through. And it was like one family I knew in Dallas in the Worldwide Church of God. The woman grew up in East Texas on a farm. She said the only time we knew that we were in a depression is when we went to town. Because we were out on the farm, we had what we always had. We had our garden, we had our canned goods, we had our chickens, we had our eggs, we had our cows, we had our milk, we had our butter. You know, all of this, we had it. We just didn't realize how much everybody else was going through at that time period until we would go into, to buy flour or something or sugar that we couldn't have otherwise. And so, you look at things that go on in this world. Are we ready, prepared? Are we really prepared for what basically now, if some of them are right, this is 2023, and they're talking about all these things in the world they're talking about is 2030. That's 7 years. Well, the tribulation is supposed to be for 7 years. So are we entering into the tribulation? Possible. Are we ready for it? Are we really ready for it? Are we really ready for the return of the Messiah? Because you think of what all the world's going to go through before we get to his return. And not only we get to his return, it was like Worldwide Church of God put out a newspaper based on the end times as such. And one of the things was talking about after the destruction that's going to go on, because you go through and you go back there in Revelation and look, it says 1/3 of the trees, 1/3 of the grass, 1/3 of this, all destroyed worldwide, not just in Israel, not just in America or something like that, but worldwide. And it goes on to, and according to today's news, I think it's Zuckerberg. No, who's Apple? Huh? Bill Gates has now issued a new. Anyways, the guy with Apple has issued a Twitter, an X, because Twitter don't exist no more. Statement about the fact that basically all living things, including trees, brush, and everything else, should be destroyed. It's his idea for climate change. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Jeremiah 49:2. Therefore, behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will cause an alarm or shout of war to be heard against Rabbah, the children of Ammon. Remember, we've been going through in Ezekiel what Yahweh was selling was going to happen to Moab and to Ammon. Well, this is Jeremiah. Same time period, same people. And it will come a desolate heap, and her daughters will be burned with fire. Then Israel will possess those who possessed him, says Yahweh. Ezekiel 21:20. This is where it says, you shall appoint a way for the sword to come to Rabbah, the children of Ammon, and to Judah in Jerusalem, the fortified. This is when Nebuchadnezzar came up to a point, and he was having to make a decision between going against Ammon or going against Jerusalem. In verse 21, for the king of Babylon stood at the parting of the way and at the head of the two ways to use divination. He had to call on the spirits. He shook the arrows back and forth, and he consulted the teraphim. He looked in the liver. In his right hand was the lot for Jerusalem to set battering rams, to open the mouth in the slaughter, to lift up the voice of Teruah, the shouting, and to set battering rams against the gates, to cast up mounds and to build forts. As the commentary says, to lift up the voice with shouting, which usually is done in sieges, when a shout is made and a place is stormed, both to animate the besiegers and to terrify the besieged. You notice in military, always every battle takes place with them shouting, yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs to raise up this, like Indians, whoopee, all this type of thing, is to raise your blood pressure and get you not to think correctly. Amos 1:14. Amos 1:14. But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it will devour its palaces, with shouting in the day of battle, with a storm in the day of the whirlwind. And their king will go into captivity, he and his princes together, says Yahweh. Amos 2:2. But I will send a fire on Moab, and it will devour the palaces of Keriot, and Moab will die with tumult, with shouting, Teruah, and with the sound of the shofar. And I will cut off the judge from among them, and I will kill all of its princes with him, says Yahweh. Zephaniah 1:7. Be silent at the presence of Adonai Yahweh, for the day of Yahweh is at hand. For Yahweh has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated his guest. It will happen in the day of Yahweh's sacrifice that I will punish the princes, the king's sons, and all those who are clothed with foreign clothing. In that day I will punish all those who leap over the threshold, who fill their masters' houses with violence and deceit. In that day, says Yahweh, there will be a noise of a cry from the fish gate, a wailing from the second quarter, and a great crashing from the hills. Wail, you inhabitants of Maktesh, for all the people of Canaan are undone. All those who were loaded with silver are cut off. It will happen at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the men who are settled on their dregs, who say in their heart, Yahweh will not do good, neither will he do evil. Their wealth will become a plunder, and their houses a desolation. Yes, they will build houses, but won't inhabit them. They will plant vineyards, but won't drink their wine. The great day of Yahweh is near. It is near and hurries greatly. The voice of the day of Yahweh, the mighty man cries there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, a day of the shofar, an alarm, the shouting, against the fortified cities, against the high battlements. I will bring distress on men, that they will walk like blind men, because they have sinned against Yahweh, and their blood will be poured out like dust, and their flesh like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to deliver them in the day of Yahweh's wrath, but the whole land will be devoured by the fire of his jealousy, for he will make an end, yes, a terrible end, of all those who dwell in the land. It's like, I go to different ones of these podcasts, and they're all basically supported by selling gold and silver. I'm going, if everything's as bad as you say it's going to be, and you got to have gold and silver, why in the world are you selling it? Shouldn't you be holding on to it? Okay? And this is one of the reasons why I see that. It doesn't matter what you have. It's only worth it if you can purchase food or trade food for it so that you can eat. Because that's going to be the main thing in your whole life. Eat. How many of you have a garden? Good for you. How many of them have chickens? How many of them have cattle? I'm just talking about things that you could survive on with the help of Yahweh keeping them alive. That is, if it's not stolen, swiped, or whatever else. Because there's actually a FEMA, I guess you could say, FEMA's been given the authority that in time of crisis and the food crisis, they can come into your house and take whatever food's in your house. And there's not anything that you can do about it because it's legal. It's already been signed into law. They're just waiting on the thing. You know, it's like everybody wondered, why are they telling me to stay home today because of COVID or whatever else they think it might be? And simple as control. See if you'll do it. That mask that's on your face? Well, none of you have one on today. Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's one, but I'm not. He's doing it for a different reason, not for the COVID. It's that it only protects everybody else from you. It doesn't protect them from you. I mean, from you from them. See, did I get that right? It will not protect you from catching it, but it protects you from giving it out. That's about all it does. Okay? And that's been proven. You know, I never thought I'd live this long to see what we're going through what we're going through right now. What the rest of the world is going through that we're not even going. How many of you are aware of the flood in Libya? The flash flood. They're now talking about that there's 20,000 people missing. Because basically it rained up in the mountains and washed down through the town and just washed the people out to sea. And then in Morocco, they had that 6.5 earthquake, which they haven't had an earthquake in 100 years. And there are people that the ones that are dead. Trying to think of what else is going on. Well, right now, if you're up in New England, you're experiencing another hurricane. And what's going to come out of it. And what I never realized is on that with Libya, that was actually a tropical storm that formed in the Mediterranean that moved on shore, moved south. Normally they form in the Mediterranean and move north like they do here, up through Europe. But this time it went south and dropped, I'm not sure, 10 or more inches of rain in just a very short time. And basically, Marrakesh just sits on like a plane. Well, then you had this. Anybody know what Burning Man is? Yeah. Well, there's a few. These are people that go every year to have a pagan ritual in the desert of Nevada, of northern Nevada. You have to drive in. It takes you several hours to get back in there. And when you get back in there, it's a flat plain. They call it a playa. That's an alkaline mud. Well, that hurricane that came in off of Baja and up through and gave the flooding in Las Vegas, well, this is north. It gave flooding, and for the first time in all the years they've been doing this, turned the place with 73,000 people camping into one big mud bowl. They couldn't get out, and nobody else could get in. They're just now more than a week or so after this is over with, getting enough. And for the first time, a three-eyed shrimp actually went through its life cycle. It was buried in that dirt out there, been there for decades, And it finally got enough water that this all hatched. So you ever thought of a three-eyed shrimp? So you see all these things that are going on in the world. Now I'm going to move forward. Yes?
Now, I was just going to say, I thought you were going to cover Ezekiel 33, but the whole point of the watchman sounding the trumpet and the alarm is to let people, turn away from their wicked ways so that they don't die in their iniquity. If I read like Ezekiel 33:11.
Ezekiel 33:11, okay.
Yeah, as I live, says Yahweh Elohim, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn away from his way and live. Turn from your evil ways, for why should you die, O house of Israel? So I just kind of want to point that out, that that's one of the main purpose of, warning people and,
Yeah.
blowing the trumpet is it's a call to repentance.
Well, the thing about it here is that Yahweh doesn't want to take pleasure in the death of the wicked. That's a lost cause. I mean, that's ones that he's lost. That Satan has won. And so, he does it. And a lot of what we're talking about here and what I was talking about with blowing the trumpet and all, these are all, you notice it says shouting, warning, 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 warning. You have to listen. In the New Testament times, in 70 A.D., those that were followers of Yeshua listened to the warning that he made in Matthew 24. That when you see Jerusalem surrounded, don't come down off your housetops. Don't go home and pick up your silver and gold. Don't go home and get another change of clothes. Don't go pack a bag. You come down off that rooftop or you come out of that field and you walk down that road away from Jerusalem. And those that followed Yeshua did that in 70 A.D. and they survived the siege and destruction of Jerusalem. The ones that didn't listen, and the thing about it was, if you go and you look through the scriptures, pretty well everybody knew about what he had said. When he was sitting there on that mountain, look over the Mount of Olives and looking back at the temple. They knew, and yet they didn't listen. You got to realize that when you see that point, that event, you have to do something. It's like even here with this, in the day of wrath, there are things that's going to lead up to it. You will have a chance to basically save your life. Hopefully make it through the tribulation and into the 1,000-year reign of Messiah. Yes, Mom.
Right today, whenever you pray and ask Yahweh to show you what to do it. When he shows it to you, do it. If you won't, he won't bother with you anymore. But if you obey him and you not even understand what he's saying, you'll see that it was right.
Yeshua is the founder and perfecter of our faith. True? Turn with me over to Hebrews 12:1. I skipped past the chapter 11 on faith because there's some things here that I think need to be said. Because it's Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, let us also, seeing we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let's run with perseverance the race that is set before us. This cloud of witnesses, everyone in this room is a witness to what I do or don't do. I've been called to task for it too. So, I mean, that's the thing about it is there are people you see out there in that world that are witnesses against you. And Yahweh can bring them up and have them stand before you and say, you remember when you did this? If it needs to be called a thing. So he says, the commentary says, wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about, as the Israelites were encompassed with the pillar of the cloud, or with the clouds of glory in the wilderness, as the Judeans say, to which there may be an allusion here also, since it follows in 1 Corinthians 10:1. Hold your place here in Hebrews 12. 1 Corinthians 10:1, now would not have you ignorant, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea and were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. That's what the commentary was referencing. Goes on in the commentary, with so great a cloud of witnesses or martyrs as the Old Testament saints, the instances of whose faith and patience were produced in the preceding chapter. These, some of them, were martyrs in the sense in which the word is commonly used. They suffered in the cause and for the sake of true religion, and they all bore a noble testimony of Elohim and for him, or I should say testimony of the Father and for him, and they received a testimony from him and will be hereafter witnesses for or against us, to whom they are examples of the above graces. And these may be compared to a cloud for the comfortable and reviving doctrines which they dropped, and for their refreshing examples in the heat of persecution, and for their guidance and direction in the ways of the Father, and more especially for their number, being like a thick cloud, and so many that they compass about on every side, and are instructive every way. Hence, the following things are inferred and urged. Lay aside every weight, every burden, every sin which is a weight. This is a warning. This is an admonition which is a weight and burden to a sensible sinner, and is a hindrance in running the Christian race, not only indwelling sin, but every actual transgression, and therefore to be laid aside as a burden. It should be laid on the Messiah or the Anointed One as a sin. It should be abstained from and put off with respect to the former conversation. Also worldly cares, riches, and honors, when immoderately pursued, are a weight depressing the mind to the earth, and a great hindrance in the work and service of the Father, and therefore to be laid aside, not that they are to be entirely rejected and not cared for and used, but the heart should not be set upon them and be over anxious about them. Likewise, the rites and ceremonies of Moses' law were weight and a burden. Now that's where they kind of go off the line. A yoke of bondage, an intolerable one, which many believing Judeans were entangled and pressed, which were a great hindrance. Okay, I'm going to go on past that, but that's not what it is. And the sin which does so easily beset us, the Arabic version renders it easily to be committed, meaning either the corruption of nature in general, which is always present and puts upon doing evil, and hinders all the good it can, or rather some particular sin is what is commonly called a man's constitution sin, or what is most inclined to and is most easily drawn into the commission of. And it may be the sin of unbelief is intended, that being opposite to the grace of faith, the apostle had been commending in the preceding chapter, and he here exhorts to, and is a sin which easily insinuates itself and prevails, and that sometimes under the notion of a virtue, as if it would be immodest or presumptuous to believe, the arguments for it are apt to be readily and quickly embraced. But as every weight, so every sin may be designed. Some references may be had to Lamentations 1:14, where it says that her transgressions were wreathed themselves or wrapped themselves about her. The allusion seems to be to runners in a race who throw off everything that encumbers, drop whatsoever is ponderous and weighty, run in light garments, and lay aside long ones, which entangle or hinder in running, as appears from the next clause. Let us run with patience the race that is set before us. The stadium or the race plot in which the Christian race is run is this world. The prize run for this is the heavenly glory. The mark to direct in it is the Anointed One. Many are the runners, yet none but the overcomers have the prize, which being held by the Anointed One is given to them. This race is set before the saints, that is, by the Father. The way in which they are to run is marked out by him in his word. The troubles they shall meet with in it are appointed for them by him. There are tests. There are things that will test you. In his gospel and his counsels and purposes, the mark to direct them is set before them in the gospel. Even Yeshua, the author and finisher of our faith, whom they are to look unto, the length of the race is fixed for them, or how far, and how long they shall run. And the prize is determined for them. and will be given them, which is held out for their encouragement to have respect unto, and becomes all the saints, and belongs to each and every one of them to run his race, which includes both doing and suffering for the anointed one. It is a motion forward, a pressing towards the mark for the prize, a going from strength to strength, from one degree of grace to another, and to a swiftness and agility necessary. And when it is performed aright, it is readiness, willingness, and cheerfulness. It requires strength and courage and removal of all impediments, and should be done with patience, which is very necessary because of the many exercises in the way, and because of the length of the race, and on account of the prize to be enjoyed, which is very desirable. The examples of the saints, and especially the anointed one, the forerunner, should move and animate to it. Going on in 1 Corinthians, got that right? In 1 Corinthians 9:24. Don't you know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run like that you may win. Every man who strives in the games exercises self-control in all things. Now they do it to receive a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible crown. I therefore run like that, not aimlessly. I fight like that, not beating the air, but I beat my body and bring it into submission, lest by any means, after I have preached to others, I myself should be rejected. And it's like a runner. A runner doesn't just go out there and do a marathon the first time he puts on a pair of tennis shoes or running shoes. They work on it for months. My oldest son, he ran a number of 5Ks, and he actually did a half marathon only because he ran out of steam on a marathon. He tried it, but he did a half marathon twice length. But you know, it's something that you take the time and to build up your strength. And it's like with what we're doing. We build up our strength by exercising what's in Scripture, exercising what's in our life, by making those changes in our life that we need to, that Yeshua takes it, become more like the example that he set. 1 Thessalonians 4:13. 1 Thessalonians 4:13. But we don't want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep. And that's all death is, sleep. So that you don't grieve like the rest who have no hope. And you listen, if you go out there and listen to the world, there's no death, nothing after life, after death. You're going to die, you're going to rot in that grave, and that's it. But Yeshua didn't rot in that grave. He was resurrected, which means that the Father has the ability to resurrect every one of us. It's in verse 14, for if we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, even so the Father will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Yeshua. For this we tell you by the word of the Master, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Master, will in no way precede those who have fallen asleep. They will be the first resurrected. For the Master himself would descend from heaven with what? A shout, a teruah, with the voice of the archangel. How loud is the voice of an archangel? I mean, the Israelites, when it was so loud at Mount Sinai that they put their hands over here and said, we don't want to hear you no more. With the Father's trumpet, shofar, the dead and the anointed one will rise first. This word here is kaluma, an order, a command, a stimulating cry, either by that which animals are roused and urged on. You whip your horse, to get him to go faster, as horses by the charioteers, hounds by the hunters, or that which is signal given to men. So, it was, let's see. In verse 17 of 1 Thessalonians, then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Master in the air, so we will be with the Master forever. Not in heaven. Here on earth. during the millennium. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. Looking to Yeshua, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the stake, despising his shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of the Father. That's the example set. Do not grow weary, Hebrews 12:3. For consider him who has endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, that you don't grow weary, fainting in your sores. You know, it's this idea is, well, he didn't show up when I thought he was going to show up. So I guess it ain't going to happen. So I'm going to go on about my life and do whatever I want to do. And then when I hear that he's actually going to show up, I'll come back and straighten my life out again. Because I've gone through groups that have done that. Where the people were prepared for the first Sunday in January 1972, to go to a place called Petra. I walked through the gates of, I guess you can say, the seek a canyon that goes into Petra in 2000. 28 years after they were supposed to go. And none of them had ever been there. And when I got down in there and saw the conditions down in there, I was more than happy that I didn't go. Because it's a barren rock. There's caves carved in the walls. That's where you were going to spend your time. Those caves, it's rock. Think of how cold it is in there. Because you got nothing but rock to lay on. So, anyway, we were down in there, and we spent about a couple of hours, and then I walked out. It was about a mile to walk out. Betty didn't have to walk. Her and the tour guide, he had hired a little horse. Looks like a you see the Kentucky walking horses and that little surrey behind it. Well, this was something similar to that. So it was the guy that was working the horse, the tour guide, and my wife. I left before they left, and I was about halfway out when they come past me on the stones, and I got a video of it somewhere when they passed me going out. But you know, it's the thing about it is, people fainted, people walked away. When it didn't happen in 72, people gave up totally and walked away because they only were there because they were going to get an immediate prize. They were going to be those special people. They were going to be those ones that had over 10 cities or 15 cities or 50 cities or whatever. They didn't look at the fact of just being alive and being with Yeshua. I'm going to have to cut some of this down.
Dennis?
Yes.
Remember, we've got this rapture mania going on around. People are looking to be taken up any moment now, like today or tomorrow, either one.
Okay, what we're talking about now?
We got this rapture mania. People
Oh, rapture mania? Yeah.
This year there's this wide thing about people thinking, tomorrow's the day of trumpets. We're all going to be taken up and raptured.
Yeah, David, I think, got a phone call wanting to know if today was when the Messiah was returning.
No, you're kidding me. You're pulling my leg now, right?
Nope.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
That's real for other
you
people.
think about it. Day of trumpets. Shouting. Says Yeshua will return with a shout. The voice of an archangel. Yes, Curtis.
But you ever notice that a lot of these preachers and evangelists and whoever that are pushing this message, they don't keep the day themselves?
No. Well, most everybody else will be keeping it tomorrow.
I mean, they don't even keep the day at all.
Yeah. But I mean, they're actually doing more evangelical type programs now, and they will be doing it tomorrow. They'll be celebrating because they'll be keeping in concert with the Hillel 2 calendar.
And they'll be waiting for
Because it's got a postponement in it. Why did it have a postponement in it? Think about it. Back-to-back Sabbaths. Okay? You realize that in within the next month or so, we're going to have 4 back-to-back Sabbaths. That by making that postponement adjustment, it moves today to Sabbath. It moves atonement to Monday. And it moves the start of the Feast of Tabernacles to Sabbath, ending on a Sabbath. So you've got these 4 sets in our calendar. You got 4 sets of back-to-back, and that's what the rabbis took out by adding that postponement rule in the Jewish calendar.
And who gave them permission to move it?
Well, that's right. Nobody did. So we have those. And within the Worldwide Church of God, there was only one day. There was only one time there was in a year that there was a back-to-back Sabbath. That's because they counted Pentecost, with it landing on a Sunday, and they couldn't get around it once they did the count. Whereas the Jewish calendar sets it as, I think, the 5th or 6th day of the 3rd month. So it doesn't always. It falls in the middle of the week sometimes, and whatever. The 50th day. But anyway, you look at all of this. That was all the things that we ran into back in '98 when we were working on the calendar and trying to determine the best application of it and what would work according. And you don't look at it from the point of view that it's inconvenient to have a Sabbath, or weekly Sabbath and atonement, or the first day of a Sabbath for the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, and a weekly Sabbath, and then following week a weekly the last great day being a Sabbath on a Friday, with a weekly Sabbath following. That's why up there we'll actually be up there for 9 days for having services. So when we was talking about weary, we have an example of, they give here in this, an example of Genesis 27:46. And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Heth, that's even before she sent him home to family, takes a wife of the daughter of Heth, such as these, of the daughters of the land, what good will my life do me? Then Matthew 10:25, it is enough for the disciples that he be like his teacher. It is enough for the disciple that he be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more those of his household? You grow weary. Hebrews 12:4. You have not yet resisted to blood, striving against sin. Let's see, what do I got? You place there in Matthew 25:36. Peter said to him, talking to you about Yeshua, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. All the disciples also said likewise, all of them, we will not deny you. Then Yeshua came with them to the place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be sorrowful and severely troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. Okay, what's that mean?
5 minutes. 3 minutes.
2 minutes now.
2 minutes.
To the end of the tape?
Yeah.
I'm at the CDs?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought when you gave me 5, I still had the 20. Well, okay. Let's see if I can get, I would recommend that you read all of chapter 12 and 13 of Hebrews, because it's giving examples of what we need to be doing. It gives an example of what Yeshua did and how we are to follow and be in his likeness. This day of shouting, one of the things you want to be able to, I should say would be happy to be able to see, is the return of the Messiah, and with a shout. And whether you're still alive and changed into a spirit being, or whether you're in the grave and you are resurrected. Because actually you'll be ahead of the ones that are alive. You get first choice. And you want to be in that first resurrection. You don't want to be... The second one is only as a... what do you call it? Alternate price? Consolation prize. It doesn't carry the same quality as the first one. The first one is going to put you in a much better position in the kingdom of Yahweh. So on this day of shouting, hallelujah, praise Yahweh. No, come on.
Hallelujah, praise Yahweh.
Hallelujah, praise Yeshua.
Hallelujah, praise Yeshua.
Thank you.